you can see very huge growth of settlements, size and population, as well as the creation of a wall that was built to annex not only East Jerusalem, but big parts of the West Bank surrounding Jerusalem area as well. So in addition to that, they created bypass roads, which were, this is an example of the bypass roads that are segregated roads, which Palestinians cannot use. And of course, they created checkpoints, and then they occupied another area called Area E1, and they created many other structures to guarantee the separation of Jerusalem from the rest of the West Bank. By the way, 300,000 Palestinians, of course, live in East Jerusalem. And many of us, where I was born in Jerusalem, I practiced as a medical doctor in the major hospital in Jerusalem, East Jerusalem, for 15 years. And since 2005, they issued an order preventing me from entering Jerusalem, not even to visit my sister who lives there. Of course, I don't respect the law, and I violated, for which I was arrested 4 times, but I will continue to do that, because I think that their law is illegal, and we cannot accept illegal laws. So, actually that sounds very strange, illegal law, you know, but that's the reality. This is an example of what the Israeli government did. These are settlements surrounding Jerusalem. Look how much growth took place between the year 2010 and 2012. All these are settlements units that were built in each of these settlements. For example, here you're talking about 13,000 units in one of these settlements. In others, it's 6,000, etc., etc. This is just to give you an idea how fast the growth of settlement activities and colonial activities is happening. This is another example. All these are checkpoints surrounding Jerusalem to block and prevent Palestinians from entering the city. And of course, the very sad thing is the fact that Palestinians living in Jerusalem are deprived from the right of building houses on their land. And most of the time, if a Palestinian wants to build a house on his or her land, they would not be given permits. So you have family growth. If the people leave Jerusalem to build somewhere else in the other parts of the West Bank, they would lose their identity card. And that means losing their health insurance, their social security, and their right to be in Jerusalem. But so what Palestinians do, they build without a permit. And the Israelis then come in and demolish the houses. There are 10,000 houses today in Jerusalem that are threatened to be demolished. Every week they demolish new houses. And the saddest thing, the most painful thing, is that they would come to a person who spent all her money or his money on building a house for themselves and for their children. They would come and tell them, your house will be demolished. Either we demolish it for you and you have to pay $50,000, or you demolish it by your own self. And many people, like in this case, demolish their own houses after they build it. Is there a more insulting and inhuman thing that is more than that? This is an example of the plan, and it's an area called Silwan. It's part of the old city of Jerusalem. This area, which is a very poor area, by the way, and people hardly make it, all the houses in this section, 120 houses, have orders from the Israeli government, orders of demolishing. They will be demolished. Why? Because there are Israeli settlers, illegal settlers in this place, and the Israeli government want to destroy 120 Palestinian homes so that the settlers here would have a garden that they can enjoy. But when we speak about the problem of settlement growth, I just wanted to show you an example of why this is problematic. This is a settlement called Har Gilo in 2011. You can see here empty places. Here you see how these empty places within 1 year were filled with new settlement blocks. It's like a race. that the Israeli government is conducting to change facts on the ground by illegally annexing and building settlements. This is an example of how serious the land grab is. I chose the area of Bethlehem. Bethlehem, the birthplace of Jesus Christ. This area, in 1967, Israel annexed East Jerusalem, and with it, it annexed parts of the three little towns here, Beit Sahur, Beit Jala, and Bethlehem. And in the case of Beit Sahur, they annexed about 17% of the land. They annexed more than 8% of Bethlehem territory, and no less than 22% of Beit Jala area. But it didn't stop there. In 2002, they came in and built the wall. They call it they claim it's a wall for security, but this is nonsense. The proof to that is that I can penetrate that wall anytime I want to go to Jerusalem. They built the wall not for security reasons, as they claim, but for the particular goal of annexing the land and appropriating it. And in this case, this is an example. By building the wall, they annexed additional part of Bethlehem, additional part of Beit Sahur, and no less than 24% additional land of the area of Beit Jala. So basically, this town has lost 50% of its land because of these processes. To add insult to injury, they created more settlements, new settlements. And of course, it is to be expected that soon they will say we have to expand the wall to give more security to these settlements that are built illegally on appropriated land. This is the West Bank. This is what is called state land, as it existed in 1967. State land means the land is owned by the state. Of course, it's not Israeli state. It's Palestinian territory. But the Israelis use the claim that if you have state land, then the government can use it, the Israeli government can use it the way they want for building settlements, of course. So what we had here is this part of the West Bank being state land. What did 700,000 dunams. What they did is to increase this area by making a military order, adding 900,000 new dunams to be considered state land. And most recently, they made another order to include 600,000 additional dunams. So basically, they're taking away most of the land of the West Bank and claiming that it is state land. This is an example of how serious the process is. This is area A and B. What they did is, of course, during the course of the last 46 years, is to create so many settlements. All these are settlements. Then they added settlement master plan, which means they added new territory for the use of settlements. Then they added settlement outposts. Then of course, there are Israeli closed military areas which Palestinians cannot enter. Then Israeli military bases. Then they added the segregation wall to include, to appropriate more land. Then declared state land. Then Israeli bypass roads, which Palestinians cannot drive on. Then settlement expansion, outpost expansion, uprooting trees, demolishing houses, etc., etc., etc. How can we build a state in this? It's impossible. And they use the fact that the people of the world don't know these details. They don't know the reality, and the world media, unfortunately, does not bring to you the real narrative of the Palestinian situation. They abuse the fact that the Israeli narrative is so dominant in international media. Gaza, of course, is another big story. I will not go into details of what happened during the wars on Gaza, where more than 2,000 people were killed and several thousand were injured, and more than 25,000 houses were demolished during the last two wars that Israel conducted against Gaza. But just imagine the situation that Gaza is besieged by the Israeli army from all directions. The sea is besieged by Israeli Navy, and fishermen cannot go deeper than 6 miles into the sea, because if they do so, they will be shot at. Recently, this area became 6 miles. It used to be 3 miles for more than 10 years. And the air is also controlled by Israeli, of course, planes and drones that carry missiles. And whenever they identify somebody they don't like, they can shoot him and kill him. The wall itself is an example of how terrible the system of racial discrimination is. This wall is described frequently in the press, in the Western press, as the fence. And when you hear the word fence, you think that's normal. Neighbors have fences between themselves. This is not a fence at all. It's a wall that is 3 times as long and twice as high as Berlin Wall used to be. The same Berlin Wall that everybody celebrated the downfall of 20 years ago. This wall is so huge. This is an example. This is a woman standing on the roof of her 2-floor building in Bethlehem. Her house is surrounded by the wall from all directions. Recently, this woman was told that she cannot go to the roof of her own house anymore because she would represent a threat to the wall. This is the main road between Jerusalem and Ramallah. The road is cut into 2 pieces by the wall, and in this case, as in 85% of the time, the wall is not separating Israelis from Palestinians. It is actually separating Palestinians from Palestinians. And that's why it's not a wall for security, it's a wall for segregation. Qalqilia is a town in the north with 46,000 people living in it. Since 10 years, Qalqilia has been besieged by a wall that is surrounding it from all directions, leaving only one little passage, a small road that is 8 meters width, with a gate. And the gate has a key. You can see the wall surrounding the city from all directions. And more than that, there are tens of thousands of Palestinians today who have been stuck between the wall and the Israeli borders. They cannot move east or west. But they need to go to schools, they need to go to universities, they need to go to hospitals, to clinics. They cannot do that unless they have military permit, even if they are children. But if they have military permit, they will not be allowed to cross except according to their army schedule, which says here from 7:40 to 8 in the morning, from 2 to 2:15 p.m., and from 6:45 to 7 p.m. 50 minutes a day. And this is how it looks when children go to school. They have to carry the permits, and they have to line and wait for the soldier to open the gate. And sometimes the soldier forgets to open the gate. Sometimes these kids get stuck behind the wall in rain, under the sun. And I usually ask the question, if these children, God forbid, were Jewish children, what would be the world's reaction to this? Wouldn't we be seeing a huge campaign against anti-Semitism that is practiced against these children? Well, ironically, this is also anti-Semitism practiced against Palestinian children, because, by the way, we are also Semites. And it's an anti-Semitic action by Israeli soldiers against Palestinian children. That's how, from scientific perspective, how things can be described. And this is another example of how terrible the situation is. This is a farm in the north, and this is what remained of it after the wall was built. This used to be a market in a village called Nazir Isa. This is what happened to it after the wall was built. And this is a house that was cut into 2 pieces. This is how close the wall is to people's houses. And this is an example of an illegal Israeli settlement. And this is how a Palestinian village looks like in the same neighborhood. People suffer a lot And human rights violations are huge. This is an example. These workers are standing in line to cross the checkpoints. There are 640 military checkpoints in the West Bank today, depriving people from freedom of movement. And if the workers need to go to work, they have to stand in line starting from 2 in the morning, sometimes or 3 in the morning, sometimes waiting for 3-4 hours to be allowed to cross in each direction when they go to work and when they come back from work. Besides, of course, all the kinds of humiliations they are subjected to. The violations of human rights are beyond description. It's called the Palestinian Nonviolent Resistance Movement, the Popular Resistance Movement. We believe that this movement has a lot of chances to succeed. And this movement is growing. We even have some Israelis, good Israeli people, who come like this young man and join us in demonstrations against the army. They are a small minority, of course, but they are important. And they are exposed to the same risk we are exposed to. This popular resistance movement is very important. It represents hope. And it tries to follow the same traditions of Martin Luther King, Gandhi, and Mandela in trying to adopt all the right methods, the appropriate methods in struggling against this injustice. But we are encountered frequently with severe violence. Places like this one, where people have been demonstrating for 8 years constantly, every week, not missing one Friday. Even when they have a wedding, the groom and the bride will go out and demonstrate against the wall and against the land grab that is happening. But we are encountered, as I said, with severe violence. They shoot at us tear gas in huge quantities. We're talking about machines that they've invented which can throw up to 40 tear gas bombs at once in the same locality, creating what we call a closed room effect, which means people who find themselves inside a cloud of this tear gas could definitely suffocate to death. That's what happened to a young woman called Jawahir Abu Rahman, who was intoxicated with the tear gas and lost her life. They use not only tear gas bombs, they use even high velocity bullets, sometimes against peaceful demonstrators. This is an example. This is Ahmed Hassan Yusuf, who was shot in the head and lost his life. He was a 10-year-old boy. Another example is what they call rubber bullets. And these rubber bullets are nothing but metallic bullets covered with a very thin piece of rubber. And if they hit the brain or the eye or the neck, they can be fatal. Sometimes they even use tear gas bombs as bullets. They will shoot somebody in the chest or the head with a tear gas bomb. 2 of my colleagues lost their eyes because of that. A third young, wonderful man, his name was Basim Abu Rahman. He was hit in the chest and killed instantly with one of these tear gas bombs. And sometimes they do horrible things. Like in this case, this young man was peacefully demonstrating. He's the brother of the young woman who died. He was carrying a flag, just demonstrating peacefully. And he was arrested. He was handcuffed, blindfolded. And while he was handcuffed and blindfolded, he was forced to sit on the ground for 2.5 hours. After which, while he was blindfolded and handcuffed, an Israeli officer made a soldier shoot him from a distance of 1.5 meters. Using dogs is becoming a habit against peaceful demonstrators as well. And what you see here are images from a village called Kufr Qaddoum in the north, near Nab, in Qalqilia area. Again, you can see the soldiers beating people, following them, shooting at them, shooting tear gas, shooting rubber bullets, as well as using the dogs to arrest the demonstrators.